Echoes of my cousin Savannah's cruel laughter from the penthouse balcony still rang in my ears, far sharper than the crack of my skull against the pavement. Except I wasn't dead on the street below. I was blinking at the familiar walls of my childhood bedroom, thrust backward in time exactly 1 month before she tore my life apart. The scent of rain and copper was still thick in my nose, suffocating me. I gasped, my hands clawing at my own chest, expecting to find shattered ribs and a heart that had stopped beating. Instead, my fingers curled into the soft, familiar cotton of my old college t-shirt. I blinked against the harsh morning sunlight, filtering through the floral curtains. My breathing was ragged, my skin drenched in a cold sweat. I scrambled out of bed, nearly tripping over a stack of finance textbooks, and threw myself in front of the full-length mirror. No blood. No broken bones. Just me. Ellie. 24 years old, pale, terrified, and very much alive. My trembling hands grabbed my iPhone from the nightstand. The screen lit up. Tuesday, September 12th, 2023. I dropped the phone. It hit the carpet with a soft thud. I had gone back. I had literally died. Pushed over a 50-story balcony by the cousin who had systematically stolen my career, my fiancé, and my sanity, only to wake up exactly 30 days before the beginning of the end. In my past life, September 12th was the day I finalized my portfolio for the senior analyst position at Montgomery Holdings, the most ruthless and prestigious private equity firm in Chicago. It was the job that was supposed to change my life. I had spent 6 months analyzing a volatile tech acquisition, a startup called OmniStream, uncovering a hidden debt structure that would have cost Montgomery millions. My presentation was flawless. It was my golden ticket, until Savannah took it. Savannah, my aunt's daughter, who had lived in my house since we were 12 because my parents took pity on them after her father left. Savannah, who had always looked at my accomplishments not with pride, but with a predatory hunger. In my previous life, she had snooped through my laptop, stolen my entire OmniStream presentation, and slept with Liam, the junior hiring manager, and my boyfriend of 3 years, to ensure she got the presentation slot before me. She pitched my work verbatim. Edward Montgomery, the firm's notoriously cold CEO, hired her on the spot. When I went in for my interview an hour later with the exact same data, I was laughed out of the building, blacklisted for plagiarizing my brilliant cousin. Liam dumped me that same night, claiming he couldn't be with a liar. The ensuing month had been a nightmare of gaslighting, public humiliation, and ultimately a fatal confrontation at Savannah's new luxury apartment. But not this time. A sharp knock on my bedroom door yanked me from my memories. The door swung open without waiting for an answer. "Ellie, are you deaf? I've been calling you for 10 minutes, Aunt Brenda snapped, her arms crossed over her cheap silk robe. She looked exactly as she had in my nightmares, sharp, bitter, and forever acting as though we were the guests in our own home. "Savannah needs to borrow your car today. She has a very important networking brunch." A cold, unfamiliar calm washed over me. The old Ellie, the people-pleasing, naive girl who thought family meant unconditional love, would have handed over the keys and taken the bus in the rain. The new Ellie just stared at her. "No," I said, my voice shockingly steady. Aunt Brenda blinked, taken aback. "Excuse me?" I said, "No, Aunt Brenda. I need my car. I have to finalize my presentation." I turned back to my mirror, picking up a hairbrush and dragging it through my tangled waves. "If Savannah wants to network, she can call an Uber." You are being incredibly selfish, Ellie, Brenda hissed, her face flushing red. Your cousin has been struggling to find her footing since graduation. You know she gets anxious. The least you could do is support her. I'm sure she'll manage, I replied coolly, shutting the door in her face. I heard her storm off down the hallway, muttering under her breath about my arrogance. A slow, dark smile crept onto my face. I booted up my laptop. There it was. The folder named Montgomery_OmniStream_final. The magnum opus that had gotten me killed. I opened the spreadsheet, looking at the intricate formulas, the hidden debt liabilities I had painstakingly uncovered in OmniStream's offshore accounts. I hovered my cursor over the file. My initial instinct was to lock it down, to encrypt it with a 20-character password, hide my USB drives, and secure my future. I could go to Montgomery Holdings, blow them away, and secure the job. But what would that really accomplish? Savannah would just find another way to play the victim. She would poison my family against me, sleep with Liam behind my back anyway, and continue to be a parasite. Beating her to the punch wasn't enough. If she wanted my life so badly, I was going to let her have it. I was going to hand her the steering wheel to a car I had rigged to explode. I didn't lock the file. Instead, I duplicated it. I created a new folder, cleverly named confidential_Montgomery_pitch. If Savannah wanted to steal my dream job, I was going to make sure it became her ultimate nightmare. For the next 3 days, I played the part of the stressed, overwhelmed candidate perfectly. I drank dangerous amounts of black coffee, scattered highlighters across the dining room table, and paced the living room muttering about capitalization rates and EBITDA. Savannah watched me like a hawk. She was beautiful, I'll give her that. She had that effortless, tragic heroine look, big doe eyes, perfect blonde highlights, and a soft voice that made men want to protect her. She sat on the velvet sofa, filing her nails, her eyes constantly darting toward my glowing screen. You're working so hard, Chloe, Savannah purred one evening, walking up behind me and leaning over my shoulder. I could smell her expensive perfume, bought with money she had borrowed from my mother. Is that the Montgomery thing? Yeah, I sighed, rubbing my temples dramatically. It's a monster. Edward Montgomery is obsessed with this OmniStream acquisition. If I can prove it's a solid buy, the senior analyst job is mine. Wow, she breathed, her eyes locking onto the charts. It looks so complicated. It is, I lied smoothly, but I finally cracked the valuation model. The projections are incredibly lucrative. I wasn't looking at the real file. I was looking at the dummy file I had spent 48 hours engineering. The real OmniStream was a toxic asset. They were bleeding cash, hiding massive liabilities in shell companies in the Cayman Islands. In my original life, I had exposed this, saving Montgomery Holdings from a $50 million blunder. In the dummy file, I completely erased the offshore debt. But I didn't just make the company look good. I made it look like the holy grail of tech investments. I artificially inflated the projected user acquisition metrics using a highly illegal revenue recognition loophole. To an untrained eye, or a junior manager like Liam, it looked like a stroke of absolute genius, but to the vicious, eagle-eyed auditors at Montgomery Holdings, once the acquisition went to the final regulatory stages, it would be flagged as catastrophic corporate fraud. Whoever pitched this model, championed it, and put their name on it, wouldn't just be fired. They would face civil litigation. They would be federally investigated. I'm just going to leave this open, I yawned, stretching my arms. I need a shower. I can't look at these numbers anymore. Take your time, Savannah said sweetly, her eyes glittering in the light of the laptop screen. "You deserve a break." I walked upstairs, went into the bathroom, and turned the shower on. I didn't get in. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, checking the remote access software I had installed on my phone. On my screen, I watched in real time as Savannah sat in my chair. I watched her plug a sleek silver USB drive into the side of my laptop. I watched the progress bar as she dragged the confidential_Montgomery_pitch folder onto her drive. It took exactly 42 seconds. 42 seconds to steal my hard work. 42 seconds to seal her own doom. That Friday night, we had a family dinner. My parents, Aunt Brenda, Savannah, and my boyfriend, Liam, were all crowded around the mahogany dining table. Liam was handsome, with perfectly styled dark hair and a charming, easygoing smile. He worked as an HR and recruitment coordinator at Montgomery Holdings. He was my supposed in at the company, the one who had told me about the OmniStream project to begin with. In my first life, I had thought Liam was my soulmate. Now, looking at him across the table, I just felt nauseous. I noticed the way his knee brushed against Savannah's beneath the table. I noticed the secret, conspiratorial glances they shared when my parents weren't looking. They were already sleeping together. The betrayal that had once shattered my heart now just fueled my focus. "So, Ellie," Liam said, cutting into his steak. "Big day on Monday. You ready for the presentation? Edward is sitting in on the final round himself." "I am," I said, offering a bright, manufactured smile. "I've practically bled over this data. I think it's going to blow him away." "Well, don't get too confident," Aunt Brenda chimed in, swirling her red wine. "There are a lot of talented people out there. In fact, Savannah has some wonderful news." The table went quiet. Savannah looked down, playing coy, a delicate blush rising to her cheeks. "Oh, it's nothing big," Savannah murmured. I also secured an interview at Montgomery Holdings for the senior analyst role." My mother dropped her fork. "What? Savannah, you majored in communications. This is a high-level private equity job, and Ellie has been preparing for this for months." "I know," Savannah said, her voice trembling slightly, playing the victim instantly. "But Liam mentioned they were opening up the floor to unconventional candidates who can present well. I submitted a portfolio, and they loved it. I'm not trying to step on Ellie's toes, I swear. I just want to make something of myself." Liam reached out and patted Savannah's hand, right in front of me. "She's right, Mrs. Evans. The firm values fresh perspectives. Savannah has a real shot." "I think it's wonderful," I said. The entire table stared at me. Savannah's eyes narrowed slightly, suspicious of my calm reaction. In the original timeline, I had screamed. I had thrown a glass of water at the wall, accused her of being a copycat, and looked like an unhinged, jealous maniac, which only pushed Liam further into her arms. "I mean it," I continued, taking a slow sip of my water. "May the best woman win. Right, Savannah?" "Right," she smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. Monday morning arrived like a thunderclap. The rain was pouring down in sheets, matching the stormy atmosphere in the house. At 7 a.m., the scream tore from my throat. "My drive! Where is my flash drive?" I tore my room apart, throwing papers into the air, flipping my mattress, sobbing hysterically. My parents rushed in, panicked. "Ellie, honey, what's wrong?" my mother asked, trying to grab my frantic hands. "My backup drive is gone. The main file on my laptop is corrupted," I wailed, letting thick, wet tears stream down my face. I had intentionally corrupted my own hard drive the night before. Everything is gone. 6 months of work, Mum. It's just gone. Aunt Brenda leaned against the doorframe, sipping her coffee with barely concealed glee. Well, that's what happens when you're disorganized, Ellie. You should have been more careful. Savannah walked past the doorway, dressed in a stunning, tailored white blazer that I knew for a fact she had bought with my stolen credit card. She looked like a cover model for a business magazine. She paused, looking into my chaotic room. "I'm so sorry, Ellie," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Do you want me to tell Liam you're withdrawing?" "Get out!" I screamed at her, throwing a pillow at the door. She flinched, playing the frightened bird perfectly, and hurried down the stairs. "I have to go. My presentation is at 9 a.m. I collapsed onto the floor, burying my face in my hands, sobbing loudly until I heard the front door click shut and the sound of my aunt's car pulling out of the driveway. As soon as the engine faded into the distance, my tears stopped instantly. I stood up, wiping my dry eyes, and walked over to my closet. I bypassed the conservative grey suit I had planned to wear to Montgomery Holdings. I didn't need it. I wasn't going to the interview. Instead, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I had memorized in my past life. The direct line to Oliver Hayes, the chief risk officer at a rival firm, Apex Capital. Apex was Montgomery's biggest competitor, and I knew for a fact they were also sniffing around the OmniStream deal, trying to figure out if they should outbid Edward Montgomery. "Oliver Hayes," a deep, gruff voice answered on the second ring. "Mr. Hayes, my name is Ellie Evans. I have the true, unredacted financials for OmniStream's offshore debt liabilities, the ones they are hiding from you and Edward Montgomery." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Who is this?" "Someone who wants a job," I replied smoothly, "and someone who is about to save you $50 million. While Savannah was standing in a glass boardroom, confidently presenting a fraudulent, mathematically disastrous pitch to the most terrifying CEO in Chicago, I was securing an executive track at his rival firm. At 11:30 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Liam. "Liam. Ellie, where are you?" Savannah just finished. She was incredible. Edward offered her the VP track on the spot. "I'm sorry about your files, but you can't just no-show." I stared at the text. I could picture it perfectly. Savannah, popping champagne in the lobby. Liam, kissing her cheek, thinking he had just hitched his wagon to a rising star. Edward Montgomery, shaking her hand, completely unaware that he had just signed off on a toxic asset because his new prodigy had served him a poisoned apple. Me. Tell Savannah congratulations. She earned exactly what she's getting. I tossed the phone onto my bed. The trap was set. The timer was ticking. Savannah had exactly 1 month before the financial auditors would dive into the OmniStream paperwork to finalize the acquisition. 1 month before the facade crumbled. 1 month before she lost everything. And I was going to enjoy every single second of the fallout. The first 2 weeks were a blur of champagne and vanity for Savannah. Every evening, she would waltz through our front door wearing designer bags and heels that cost more than my first car, tossing them carelessly onto the hardwood floor. She was the star of the Montgomery Holdings office. Liam had seen to that, planting stories of the brilliant young analyst who had identified the OmniStream gold mine. She wasn't just a senior analyst. She was becoming a local celebrity in the industry. I saw it on LinkedIn. Savannah Miller, the visionary transforming private equity, read a featured article by a local business journal. I, meanwhile, was buried in the trenches at Apex Capital. Oliver Hayes wasn't a man for parties or office praise. He was a creature of spreadsheets and hard, cold facts. He didn't care about my family drama. He cared that the data I provided on OmniStream saved his firm from investing in a dying company. "You have an eye for the rot, Ellie," Oliver said one Tuesday, tossing a file onto my desk. "Most people look at the shiny revenue projections. You looked at the debt interest payments hidden in the offshore subsidiary. It's a rare skill." "I just like to be thorough," I replied, keeping my eyes fixed on my monitor. While I was building a reputation based on actual competence, Savannah was starting to live in a house of cards. The perfect pitch I had given her was a theoretical masterpiece. It assumed a market growth rate that was mathematically impossible to sustain, especially given OmniStream's actual operating costs. I watched from the sidelines, and from the occasional leak I received from a disgruntled junior staffer at Montgomery whom I'd befriended, as the cracks began to show. Savannah was panicked because the real-world numbers weren't aligning with her brilliant projections. She was forced to adjust the books. In the world of private equity, that's not just a mistake, it's a crime. I was at the kitchen table on a Tuesday evening when she stormed in, looking frantic. Her hair, usually perfectly coiffed, was pulled back in a messy, frazzled bun. "Ellie," she demanded, slamming her designer tote onto the table. "You have the original notes on the OmniStream model, right? The ones you used when you had your little breakdown." I looked up from my laptop, my expression blank. "I deleted everything, Savannah. I told you I corrupted the drive. It's all gone." "Don't lie to me," she hissed, her face contorting with stress. "The quarterly audit is in 3 days. Edward is asking for the underlying methodology behind the user acquisition growth. The numbers aren't making sense with the current market data. I need you to show me the bridge you used." "I can't help you, Savannah," I said, my voice steady. "I'm working for Apex now. You're at Montgomery. If you don't know the math, maybe you shouldn't have stolen the presentation." The air in the room grew heavy. She lunged forward, grabbing the edge of the table. "I didn't steal anything. I improved it. But your foundation was flawed. If I go down, I'm telling Edward that you were the one who fed me the initial data. I'll ruin you." I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound that seemed to catch her off guard. "Go ahead. Tell him. Tell the CEO of the most prestigious firm in Chicago that you didn't do your own due diligence, that you relied on flawed data from your cousin who wasn't even employed there. See how that plays out for your career." She blanched. She knew I was right. She was trapped in the very hole she had built for herself. That night, I saw the panic in her eyes for the first time. She knew the walls were closing in. She had tied her entire reputation, her lifestyle, and her relationship with Liam to a lie. And the lie was about to be exposed by the very auditors she had bypassed to get the promotion. She turned on her heel and ran upstairs, calling Liam. I could hear her sobbing, begging him to get her out of the audit. But I knew Liam. He was a climber. He loved Savannah only as long as she was the golden girl. Once she started smelling like a liability, he'd cut her loose faster than a sinking stock. The countdown had begun. She had 48 hours until the board meeting. 48 hours until the truth of the OmniStream acquisition and the fraud required to sell it came crashing down. The morning of the final board meeting, the atmosphere in our shared house was suffocating. Savannah hadn't slept. She was pacing the kitchen, her hands shaking as she tried to fix her makeup. Her eyes were bloodshot, and she looked like a shell of the woman who had gloated just weeks before. She didn't look at me. She didn't speak. She just grabbed her keys and fled, smelling of desperation and expensive perfume. I waited until she was gone, then I grabbed my own coat. I wasn't going to work. I had been invited to a routine update at Montgomery Holdings, a final confirmation of the OmniStream deal, or so the board thought. When I arrived at this Montgomery headquarters, the air was electric with tension. I walked into the lobby, and the receptionist, who used to treat me like a nuisance, gave me a nervous nod. I took the elevator to the 40th floor. The conference room door was glass, allowing me to see exactly what was happening inside. Edward Montgomery sat at the head of the table, his face a mask of cold fury. Liam was sitting near the back, his head down, looking at his phone, desperately trying to distance himself from the wreckage. Savannah stood at the front of the room, her pointer trembling as she tried to explain the massive discrepancy in the OmniStream financial statements. "The data is right there, Edward," she stammered, her voice cracking. "The projection, it's just a matter of market volatility." Volatility. Edward's voice was a low, dangerous rumble. "Savannah, you claimed a 40% growth rate in a stagnant sector. We had our external auditors review your pitch. They found that these figures were not just optimistic, they were fabricated. They don't exist in any of the company's internal reports. Where did you get this data?" Savannah's eyes darted around the room. She was looking for an escape, a way out. She looked at Liam. Liam didn't look back. He was staring intensely at his shoes. Savannah hesitated. "I received the analysis from a research partner. I trusted their work." "Who?" Edward demanded. "Ellie Evans," she spat out, her eyes locking onto mine as I pushed the glass door open and stepped into the room. The entire board turned to look at me. The silence was absolute. "Is that true, Ms. Evans?" Edward asked, his gaze piercing. I walked to the table, pulling a sleek tablet from my bag. I didn't look at Savannah. I looked directly at Edward. "I have never worked for Montgomery Holdings, Edward," I said, my voice projecting clearly. "And I have never been an employee or contractor for OmniStream. If Savannah Miller claims she received her analysis from me, I would like to see the communication, because I have never sent her a single spreadsheet." I placed the tablet on the table. "However, I am currently employed at Apex Capital, and since we are also looking at the OmniStream acquisition, we performed a full independent audit of their books 2 weeks ago. Here is what we found." I tapped the screen, displaying the true catastrophic financial state of OmniStream. The offshore debts, the hidden liabilities, the fraud. "This is the reality of the company Savannah pitched to you," I continued. "If you had signed that deal, it would have bankrupted this firm. Savannah didn't just use my data. She fabricated the success of a failing company to secure a position she was unqualified for. She didn't just compromise your firm, she committed corporate fraud." Savannah's scream was primal. She lunged at me, but 2 security guards grabbed her by the arms before she could touch me. "You liar!" she shrieked, her expensive suit tearing as they dragged her toward the exit. "You set me up! You gave me that file! You wanted me to take it!" "I gave you a file," I said, watching her with a calm, detached pity. "I never told you to present it as your own work. That was your choice, Savannah. You stole the dream you thought I had, and you never stopped to check if it was actually a nightmare." Liam stood up, trying to save his own skin. "Edward, I had no idea I was just following the recruitment protocol." Edward didn't even look at him. "Clean out your desk, Liam. You're done." The fallout was spectacular. Savannah wasn't just fired, she was blacklisted. The legal team at Montgomery didn't press criminal charges to avoid the public scandal of having been fooled so easily. but they ensured she would never work in finance, tech, or any corporate setting ever again. She lost the job, the money, and the apartment. Her social media profiles, once filled with photos of her power analyst life, were wiped clean. When I got home that night, the house was empty. My parents were furious, of course, but for the first time in my life, I didn't care. I sat in my room, looking at my laptop. I had a promotion waiting for me at Apex. I had my life back. And Savannah? She was somewhere in the city, realizing that the dream life she had stolen was nothing more than a hollow, poisoned shell. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I simply closed my laptop and went to sleep, knowing that for the first time in 2 lives, I was finally the author of my own story. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I found it tasted much better when it was earned through hard work and integrity. Savannah wanted my life, so I gave her a version of it that was never meant to last. Now she's paying the price for her ambition, and I'm finally living on my own terms. If you enjoyed this journey of twists and retribution, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more stories. Stay tuned.